Welcome to the Own Up podcast with your host, Jennifer Long.
Hi, Jennifer Long here, president and master coach at Own Up and author of the book, Own Up, How to Hold People Accountable Without All of the Drama. What you're about to listen to is a podcast discussion of the fourth chapter of my book. This podcast was produced by my team. However, it was generated using artificial intelligence. And I have to tell you, I was super amazed at the discussion. And I hope you will be too. So listen in.
All right, so ready to dig into something a little different today. We're tackling accountability.
Oh, yeah, that word accountability. They can be a bit loaded, right?
It totally can. For some people, it's like instant flashbacks to every awkward performance review ever.
Exactly.
But what if I told you this deep dive, we're doing chapter 4 of Jennifer T. Long's book, Own Up. It's less about the cringe and way more about like unlocking potential.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Unlocking potential, huh? Tell me more.
So she starts off with this idea that accountability, it's not one size fits all, right? Like there's a whole
A
spectrum.
spectrum of accountability. That's interesting.
And to help us break it all down, I've got an expert with me, someone who, actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to this stuff.
Well, I don't know about all that, but I am fascinated by this idea of an accountability spectrum. It's not something you hear every day. What does Long say about the different flavors, I guess you could call them, of accountability?
Okay, so she lays out these two extremes. Fearful inconsistency is at one end, and at the other, it's consistent overpowering.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got the folks who shudder when they hear the word accountability. And on the other, you've got the accountability superheroes always ready to lay down the law.
It's funny you say superheroes because Long describes those consistent overpowering types as people who might say something like, hey, I'm just being honest. The ones who are maybe a little too comfortable dishing out the tough love.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely worked with a few of those.
Haven't we all? But here's where Long's insight gets really interesting. She points out that both of those extremes, different as they might seem, they actually both see accountability as a form of punishment.
That's fascinating. So it's like one's running from the punishment and the other's, weaponizing it.
Exactly. And neither one's really getting us where we want to be, right?
Right. So the big question is, if both these extremes are essentially dead ends, where's the middle ground?
Right. How do you create a culture of accountability that doesn't make people want to, crawl under their desks?
The million-dollar question. And Long actually makes this really interesting connection. She says that often a lack of real, genuine accountability, it comes from something you might not expect. It comes from being too focused on results.
Wait, hold on. Aren't businesses, supposed to care about results? We're talking about, the bottom line, the widget sold, the deals closed. Long even lists out all those hard measures. How can you not prioritize those?
Absolutely. Results matter. Nobody's arguing with that. But Long's point is that when you fixate on those numbers, when that's all you care about, you actually end up undermining the very people who drive those results.
So you're saying it's not about ignoring results. It's about recognizing that people are at the heart of those results.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is, this isn't just some touchy-feely idea. Long actually brings in research to back this up. There's a whole field called axiology, and it's basically the science of value.
Axiology, huh? That's a new one.
It sounds fancy, right? But basically, there's all this research that shows that valuing people, it actually leads to better results in the long run.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this all connects. So instead of just constantly pushing for those results, those numbers, we need to lead with a people-first approach.
You got it. And that brings us to one of the most, I think, challenging statements in this whole chapter. Long writes, as a manager, it's always your issue first.
Whoa, wait a minute. Even if it's crystal clear that my team messed up, they dropped the ball, not me.
Yep, even then. But before you start panicking, just remember, Long isn't saying it's about placing blame. She gives us these two really powerful questions that I think can help anyone build a better sense of ownership.
Okay, I'm listening. Hit me with these questions.
The first one Long asks is, what's my issue with this situation? Notice, it's not about pointing fingers. It's about figuring out, what was the expectation that wasn't met? What did you want to see happen that didn't?
So it's like taking a step back and really examining your own expectations before you even start looking at what anyone else did or didn't do.
Exactly. It's about understanding your own role in the situation. And then Long follows that up with a question that is so crucial. Was I clear about my expectation?
Oh, that is such a good one because it's so easy to just assume that everyone's on the same page, but we've all been burned by assumptions before, right?
Oh, tell me about it. Assumptions are dangerous.
I remember this one time I was leading this project and I was so slammed, you know how it is, and I just kind of figured my colleague, she had this one piece of info, it seemed obvious,
Oh, I've been there. Those assumptions can really bite you.
Right. Well, turns out my assumption was so wrong, and it created this whole thing, this totally avoidable mess, a total crash course in why clarity is so key.
It's so true. We think we're saving time by skipping that clear communication, but it almost always backfires, doesn't it?
100%. Which is, I think, why Long dives into these 4 mindset shifts. They're like the foundation for building real accountability.
Totally. And what I love about these shifts are not just like these vague ideas, they're tools, things we can actually use to change how we work, how we approach even like our relationships outside of work.
Okay, so let's break them down. Starting with that first shift Long talks about, it's about moving away from a deficit focus, like what went wrong, and moving towards a learning and growth focus. So what does that actually look like in practice?
So instead of just zeroing in on the mistake, like who messed up, you come at it with curiosity. Like, okay, so what can we learn from this? Or what can we do differently next time? It's about focusing on development, not blame.
Instead of like, you did this wrong, it's more like, okay, how do we all grow from this?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, love it. What about the next shift? Long talks about this idea of embracing critical thinking and, get this, co-created problem solving.
Yes. It's about those why questions, like digging deeper than just the surface level. Why did we make this decision? Why did this happen the way it did? And then, even more important, it's about working together to figure out solutions.
So it's less about dictating and more about collaborating.
100%. It's that sense of like, we're all in this together.
I like the sound of that. Okay, 2 down, 2 to go. Long also talks about becoming more reflective and clear. What does she mean by that?
I think this one's all about like hitting pause before you react, taking a moment to reflect on your own expectations, and any biases you might be bringing to the table before you make any judgment.
It's so easy to skip that step though, right?
It is, especially when you're under pressure.
Yeah.
But that's why this shift is so important.
It's about choosing understanding over judgment. I can get behind that. Okay, last but not least, Long talks about shifting from this place of shame and blame to a place of ownership and solution building.
Oh, that's a big one. Long, she says that shame and blame, they're like quicksand. They just keep you stuck. They're the opposite of progress.
Oh, I've been there, stuck in that blame cycle. It's the worst.
Totally. It gets you nowhere. But when you choose ownership, it's like you step out of that quicksand and suddenly you can breathe again. You can focus on solutions, positive action.
It's like that shift from whose fault is this
Yeah.
to, okay, how do we fix this?
Exactly. And the amazing thing is, Long points out all these benefits that come from making these 4 shifts. Like people start feeling more motivated. They feel a greater sense of autonomy.
Wait, autonomy, that's huge for people.
Right. And they're more engaged in their work, which, let's be honest, is what every leader wants.
Absolutely. It's
You-
like that feeling you get when you're doing work that matters with people you respect and you actually have the freedom to like contribute your best work. It's a totally different energy.
It really is. And it all comes back to this idea of valuing people, treating them like human beings, not just cogs in a machine.
So to bring it back to accountability, because that is what we're diving into here, it's not about achieving this perfect state of accountability, right? It's more of a journey.
100%. Long, she says it's an ongoing practice, something you're constantly working on, refining, getting better at.
So it's not about like, okay, we've achieved peak accountability, we're done.
Yeah.
It's more like, how do we keep getting better at this? Which honestly, that feels a lot more manageable.
Way less pressure than trying to be perfect. Right.
Right. But it gets me thinking, if this is an ongoing practice, what's one small thing, just one thing that we could all focus on this week to like flex that accountability muscle?
Oh, I love that question. And it really can be something small. Like even just choosing to approach one conversation this week through that relationships first lens, that's a great place to start.
So instead of like firing off that email when a deadline's missed, maybe pick up the phone.
Exactly. Or even better, if you can, have that conversation face to face. Just try to understand what's going on before you jump to any conclusions.
Because usually there's more to the story, right?
Almost always.
Okay, so have those conversations, Prioritize understanding.
Yeah.
What else? What's another small shift we can make?
Well, what if next time you catch yourself slipping into that blame game, you hit pause for a second and you ask yourself Long's 2 questions?
You mean, what's my issue here?
Hmm?
And was I clear about my expectation?
Those are the ones.
Yeah, because those questions, they force you to, take
Oh,
responsibility.
they do. They shift the focus.
Instead of making it about what the other person did wrong.
It becomes about understanding your own role in the situation.
Oh, and maybe even, push yourself to ask, what can we learn from this?
Yes. There you go.
How can we grow from this experience?
Now you're really getting it. It's those little tweaks in mindset that can make such a difference over time.
It's like a ripple effect, right? Like
Yeah.
one conversation at a time.
Exactly. And the more we can move away from that fear and blame, the more we open ourselves up to that real, powerful accountability.
The kind that actually helps people grow.
Exactly. And that's how you build those strong teams and you get better work. And honestly, you have better relationships all around.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. I've learned so much. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on accountability.
It's definitely a different way of looking at it.
It is. And it's so much more empowering than how I used to think about it. So a huge thank you to you for being brilliant and breaking it all down.
My pleasure. Always fun to chat about this stuff.
And to all of you listening, thank you for diving deep with us today. Keep those minds curious, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Own Up podcast. For more information about Own Up, please go to accountabilityatwork.com. For more information about Jennifer, please go to her author website at jennifertlong.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe in your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening.